Hi, welcome to the course. My name is Fuad, and this video series will help you understand your reading material, assessment, and health professions education. Now, I'll point out to you in this series what's important, what's not so important. So, let's go right to it. Lastly, we come to one of the most important part of the discussion about validity, which is taking a prevention focus, understanding threats to validity. The concept of threats to validity is important in our future classes when we discuss about the various groups of assessment. Remember the paper-based assessment, the observation-based assessments, the workplace-based assessments, the performance assessment, they will be discussed according to this approach. What are their strengths and what are the threats to validity that have been documented for each of these groups? Okay, but here he introduces what is threat to validity. They are common ways that assumptions fail to hold or that unintended influences creep into our interpretations. Make sense? It means that when we assume something will happen based on the validity, performance based validity, when we assume something will happen, what are the things that can make our assumption not valid? That's the threat to validity. Okay, and the two common ways to group these threats are that they are divided into construct irrelevant variance CIV and construct under representation CU. CIV CU, CIV CU. That's the common way people discuss about threats to validity. What's construct irrelevant variance? What's CIV? When scores are being affected by something other than your target attribute. Let's give a simple simple example. Student get a score of 60 in an assessment. Now that we assume that it reflects the attribute that he or she that we are measuring, but simply he got that 60 because he got uh, uh, there was a leak in the assessment, and he got a copy of the assessment beforehand. So the 60 represents his ability to prepare based on the questions which were leaked. Now that doesn't have anything to do with the attribute that was being assessed. So that is a CIV, construct irrelevant variance. If the students cannot understand what you are writing in the question, that's another example of a CIV. That's why we vet questions. All right. Construct under representation is that when we do not ask enough questions. In this means related to sampling. Okay. And if you go to page 28, it goes on to explain about that. He also explains in the second paragraph in page 28 about issue of quality, threats for quality, which he termed as threats for consequences of assessment practices. Okay, so he says if a test is very expensive, that does not necessarily threaten its measurement validity. Okay, so it's not directly related to validity. Okay, the test is very much measuring the attribute, however it's very expensive. So does that make it less valid in terms of measuring the attribute? No, but in terms of quality it becomes less valid because it's expensive. People do not prefer it, stakeholders do not prefer it, and so on and so forth. Okay, and and What's important also here, similarly, please look at table 2.3 where he gives an example, selected threats to assessment validity and quality. If you see, the table is organized mainly according to Keynes validity framework. You have scoring, generalization in page 29, and extrapolation and decisions in page 30. But in each section under scoring, he puts in, they are further organized according to the content, okay, according to Messick's sources of evidence, and gives for example, underscoring is the accuracy of the scoring keys, experience and interpretation of stimuli, and he further details out the threats to validity, classifying that this is under CIV or under CU. So please have a look at the table, try your best to understand the concept, and this will be discussed again and again in our future classes. He did write that in page 28, in the last paragraph before the table, to end on a positive note, we should recognize that even a somewhat flawed assessment, one for which several threats are realized, might still be suitable for use. Okay, so assessments are not simply valid or not valid. They can be more valid or less valid depending on how we look at it. Okay, and so in conclusion, number one, please remember that you might come across literature which describes validity as being composed of several types of validity: construct validity, content validity, face validity, and things like that. Now that is a more that's a different thinking about validity. In fact, that was the previous thinking of validity, even though there are still some authors who still use this view. The current view of validity, which we have been discussing, holds that there is only one type of validity, which is the construct validity. What you are assessing, is it clinical competence, is it problem solving, it is professionalism. That is the whole thing. That is the construct validity, is validity. And instead of many types of validity, what we are doing is we are looking at the evidence of validity. So that's one thing that you need to be aware of. Okay, and he goes on to conclude, the assessment validity and quality considerations in health professions education are central to how we foster effective learning, safe patient care, and the well-being of health professionals. Okay, so it is the reason why we do things in assessment, why we go through all the steps in assessment, which is to make our assessment